Hello, I'm very glad to be with you today. I'm sorry that I couldn't attend the conference in person, but you will understand these COVID restrictions made that very difficult for me. At least quantum technology allows me to attend the conference in this way. Today I want to talk to you about why women leaders are good quantum leaders and why quantum leaders are what we need today. For the last 300 years, everything about our world and the way we understand our world, the way we manage our world and lead our world has been defined by the ideas and principles that originated in Newton's physics. Newton's physics was so powerful in its simplicity and its promise that you can understand everything and control everything, that every major thinker in every field wanted to be the Newton of that field. And this included the way we lead our companies, lead our countries, and even in the kind of global world order that we have evolved. Newton's world was a simple, law-abiding, predictable, and controllable world. People could know everything. They could predict what was going to happen and thus control events. But our world today in the 21st century is a complex world. It's rapidly changing, it's radically unpredictable and uncertain, almost irrational. And instead of being separated into atomistic bits, everything in the 21st century world is interconnected. Global interconnectivity and the globalization that goes with it are a fact of life today. It's also the case that all the technology we use today, everything coming from computers and the silicon chip that makes them possible, is quantum technology. Quantum physics, which was discovered at the beginning of the 20th century, was a physics that described a complex, unpredictable, and uncertain reality. A reality that cannot and should not be controlled, but should be allowed to self-organize. And therefore, the leadership we need today is quantum leadership. We need quantum leadership in business, in society, in politics, and in diplomacy. The 21st century has been called the quantum age. And it's my belief that women have always been more quantum than men. We've always been cleaning up the mess in the world and in our homes. We've always been better diplomats than the men. And therefore, in these times that the 20th century is like, I think we are better placed to step up and govern a complex, messy, unpredictable, rapidly changing world. Part of this is due actually to what new research on the human brain has revealed. our brains are actually wired differently than men's brains. The way our brains are wired makes us less genius-like than a very few men at the top of the IQ scale, and less moronic than a very few men at the very bottom of the SQ scale. But it gives us an advantage, a very big advantage, over the vast range of men. And this is why. The neural connections that make our brains work are ordered differently in male and female brains. The human brain is divided into two hemispheres, a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is our logical, rational hemisphere, the hemisphere which we can work with predictable, rational events, with which we can build models to control predictable, rational events. The right hemisphere is more to do with recognizing patterns, seeing relationships and using relationships, being intuitive, seeing patterns in complexity that otherwise might not be so easily visible. Now, men have their brains organized with the neural connections running from front to back in each hemisphere. And the male brain handles the right hemisphere, but the left hemisphere better than the right hemisphere. So men tend to be more dependent on and better at logic and rationality and predictability and model building, and tend to be more Newtonian in their thinking and behavior. Women, on the other hand, have always been better at relationships, pattern recognition, seeing how to make sense out of messy situations, dealing with uncertainty. But in the Western culture up until the 21st century, the skills that were needed were the right brain skills, the ones men are good at, better at than we are. Now, women's brains, it has been discovered in these last 3 or 4 years, are wired differently. Our brains are wired from back to front, so we have the skills of both hemispheres, but our brains are also wired sideways. In the female brain, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere are interconnected, giving us an advantage over men that we are good at both hemispheric skills, both logic and rationality, and systemic pattern recognizing relational thinking. Women have a whole brain intelligence that is stronger than that most men possess. Of course, there are always exceptions. I'm talking about the vast majority of men and women when I talk about these differences. So, quantum physics, we will see in a moment, is also both and, both following the principles that normally Newtonian physics would use to describe the world, and the left brain, and involving a view of the world that is more right brain, dependent on the skills of the right hemisphere. So already, just because of our brain wiring, our neurology, we women are more quantum than men, and therefore better able to cope with the quantum world. Let me go through some specific ways that women are more quantum-like than men. The Newtonian physics said that the universe is made of matter, particles of matter. And matter has certain visible, measurable, calculatable, weighable qualities, which lends itself to study by logical, rational modeling processes. But quantum physics, which has now replaced Newtonian physics, says the world is made of energy. The smallest unit of energy that can make any event happen is called a quantum, and that's why it's called quantum physics. Now, we women have always had bags of energy. Our lifestyles, our place in society, our place in the home has made us have to have endurance and energy greater than that normally possessed by men. Men are good sprinters, women are better long-distance runners. The Newtonian universe was made of atoms, separate from each other, isolated from each other, that related to each other through forces of conflict and confrontation. To make a Newtonian particle change the position or momentum of another Newtonian particle, you bashed it with a force. Quantum physics says the world is made of relationships. In quantum physics, relationship makes reality. And there isn't really any such thing as forces acting between things. Things happen and things change because relationships develop between them, or the relationships between them change. Now again, women have always been better at making relationships than men are. Our role within the family requires that. Our role within society requires that. We aren't always bashing things in conflict and confrontation to get our own way. Just to manage our husbands, we have to learn to be good diplomats and go round the back of the men and make them feel that what we want was their idea. We're very good at that. The Newtonian physics says there is just one way. A thing can be in one place at one time. There's one way to think about making a decision, one best way forward. Which again, when you lead with that kind of thinking, tends to make you think that your way is the only way, or certainly the best way. So the world led by men has been a world of war and conflict. But quantum physics says that at the quantum level of reality, everything exists in a superposition of multiple potentialities. Quantum particles can be here and there at the same time. They can be waves and particles at the same time. They can be now and then at the same time. So in quantum leadership, there are many paths from A to B, many possible ways forward, many good solutions to problems. And we women have always been multitaskers. Again, our role in the family has made us have to be good at doing 10 things at once. We can't, in our role within the family, just concentrate and focus on one thing. We need to balance and get into relationship, cooking and changing nappies and talking to our husbands and cleaning the house and doing the shopping, all of it at the same time. So again, we're well suited to thinking in terms of multiple possibilities, multiple way forwards, multiple solutions to things, which again reduces the tendency to conflict and confrontation and makes us better able to see the other person's point of view and work with that. That's why we're better diplomats. Newtonian physics said that things are either wave-like, flowing in waves, or particle-like, tiny, atomistic, isolated, impenetrable units. The reason that quantum physics was born is because quantum physics discovered that everything is wave-like and particle-like at the same time. And that's what makes quantum physics work in messy, unpredictable, and uncertain situations. Something can be focused in this context, but have all the multiple possibilities present in case things rapidly change. Now, we women, again, have always been wave-like and particle-like. To begin with, what I said about our brains. We have both left brain capabilities and right brain capabilities, and the two work in synchrony. We're able to pull them together in a kind of total intelligence. Women have always had to play dual roles in society and in the family. In the family, we've always had to be both wives and mothers. In society, we've always had to be both homemakers and people who go out to work or become leaders. So we're used to both and in a way that men are not. Men tend to be much more either or. Again, in a world that is complex and uncertain, either or thinking limits the options, limits the relationships, creates power structures where one country has to dominate other countries. Whereas both and thinking allows multiple possibilities, allows the thought of a world that might consist of peaceful, cooperative, multipolar relationships, win-win relationships. Either or thinking produces zero-sum games. If I win, that means you have to lose. and that leads to conflict and war. But if we can both win, then we can cooperate, and we can both benefit from treaties and agreements that we make. So women's leadership would give us the possibility of a peaceful, cooperative, multipolar global order, and which we wouldn't have to say the West dominates, or America or China is the greatest superpower in the world, but we can say, no, we'll all cooperate. We'll all play a win-win game so that all nations thrive, all nations benefit, and nobody has to be the top guy or the winner. Newtonian physics says that atoms are isolated and they're always the same wherever you find them. So you could measure a Newtonian particle anywhere, in any time, in any environment, and the scientist will always say it's the same. In quantum physics, things are contextual. Things are responsive to the environment they're in. So something may be a particle in one environment, a wave in another environment. This possibility might emerge in one environment, another possibility in a different environment. Quantum physics is therefore responsive to situations and to context, to relationships, to other people. Now again, we know that men have always tended to be more reactive. Men tend to see other people and other ideas as other, and therefore something they must fight against, because only one way can be right, and only one man can be right when two men disagree. Women, again, because of our role in the family, our need to attend to the needs of our husbands, to be constantly on call to our children's changing needs, have always had to be responsive. We have to have a positive, creative response and become different in our behavior depending on the situation we're having to deal with. In today's world, where it's uncertain what situation you're going to have to deal with, uncertain where rapid change is going to take us tomorrow, women's responsiveness, again, gives us an edge in leadership qualities. Newtonian physics was atomistic. It talked about the power and influence of individual atoms, individual particles, and their power to knock each other off their course or to achieve supremacy. Quantum physics, on the other hand, is holistic. It says everything is connected to everything. The quantum universe consists of systems of relationship in relation to other systems of relationship. Men have always liked to be heroes, and they like to act on their own, to have their own achievements. We women have always had to be team players. We know how to cooperate with others to get a task done. Again, that gives us an edge as quantum leaders. Because in our companies today, and in our world today, teams replace isolated action. Quantum companies consist of self-organizing autonomous teams, whereas Newtonian companies consisted of isolated functional silos. So we are better equipped to deal with cooperating with others in a team-like way in an interconnected world where everything is related to everything. And it began because of what I just said about atomism and separation. The Newtonian world, excuse me, emphasized separation. I'm separate from you. My country is separated by borders from your country. My division in the company is separated from your division in the company by borders. Newtonian leaders build borders and boundaries. They work to separate things. They can deal better with things when they are separate. Because again, men are better at focusing narrowly on separate problems. But the quantum world, our world today, is a world of zero distance. The boundaries are coming down. The boundaries in companies are coming down. The silos are giving way to teams, multifunctional teams, not siloed function teams. The boundaries in the world are coming down. In today's world, no one nation can put up boundaries and live separately from the other nations. The COVID restrictions we are all suffering right now remind us how dependent we have become on crossing boundaries, getting rid of boundaries, and how restricted we feel at the moment. Therefore, not only do women make better quantum leaders for the reasons I've just said, but social changes in today's society mean that we are freer from domestic tasks and can go out into the world and take our place as leaders, while at the same time being the wives and mothers that we continue to be. Therefore, my fellow women, I urge you, stand up, become active, and take your position as quantum leaders. Thank you very much, and I hope I can be with you in person next year.